Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Future Tech podcast series. It's me, Charlie Sell, board director for Major Group, where I get a chance to speak, have conversations, find out much more detail with thought leaders from around the world, looking at STEM and how we can really promote STEM to the many young people out there thinking about their next career or their first career, and really what it's all about. And so today, I'm really pleased to have Tom Jackson with me today. Tom is the Director of Data Technology at News UK, and News UK is part of the global publishing house, News Corp. And Tom will go into a bit more detail about the publications that they have, but I can assure you we'll all know many of them, and the world of data and AI specifically. So Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, hello, Charlie. Thanks for inviting me. Nice to be here.
Yeah, and let's jump straight in and tell us a bit about your story. How did you get into technology?
Yeah, well, so firstly, given this is a podcast about encouraging the study of STEM subjects, I do feel a slight fraud in that I actually studied languages at university. But I did do chemistry A-level, so I guess that maybe qualifies me. But it's actually, that's a topic that I'll probably return to later in the conversation. That tech, the industry that I'm in, is actually quite a broad church with people from many different backgrounds. So we can perhaps come on to that later on. But yeah, my story. So I've been in digital publishing specifically for 28 years. And I've kind of alternated between EdTech, education technology, and news media technology, which worked well for me. It's been nice kind of switching it at times so that it keeps it fresh for me. And I've worked so my first job was actually for a small independent publisher in Cambridge, called Chadwick Healy, now owned by a large American publisher called ProQuest, producing large databases for academic research in university and public libraries. But since then, I've gone on to work for The Guardian, a national news brand that many of your listeners will be familiar with. I then worked for HarperCollins, doing educational publishing, looking at digital strategy for textbooks, atlases, dictionaries. And now I'm at News UK, and just to expand a bit on what News UK does. So we are best known as publishers of some major national news brands in the UK, The Sun and The Times and the Sunday Times. Many of your listeners will be familiar with. We're also a broadcaster. So we broadcast national and local radio stations, including the likes of Talk Sport, Virgin Radio, Times Radio, and we now have a 24-hour news TV channel called Talk TV. So it's pretty broad what we do. And my career has taken me to lots of different places. I've been behind the doors of number 10 Downing Street for one of the projects I was doing for The Guardian, where the Prime Minister lives. I've been all over China, India, America. I've met some really interesting people along the way, including once helping Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the founder of the World Wide Web, to log into his Wi-Fi when he was having trouble once. So that was an experience. But yeah, long and varied career. Now at News UK, I'm running the data technology team. As you said, we're about 90 people spread across 3 different locations, in London, here in the UK, in Sofia, in Bulgaria, and in Bangalore, in India. And just to sum up quickly what we do work across the entire data lifecycle. So as a news media business, we have loads of great content about our content itself and about how our audience, our readers, our listeners, our viewers interact with that content. And it's our job, firstly, to collect that data, then to store it in a single location, a data warehouse, tidy it up so that it's easy to use. And then we get value from that data through things like data science models. We're doing a big project on personalization, for example, at the moment, using AI to take what we know about our users and then adjust the user experience in our websites and apps accordingly and show them stuff that we think they'll be interested in. So yeah, that's me. That's my history.
Yeah, and as you say, you know, what's lovely about that is the ability to have traveled around the world being in a, you know, in a STEM related job. It's, you know, the days or sometimes the perceptions that if you're into engineering or technology specifically, it can be, you know, working within one building as such for many time, you know, for much of a person's career. But no, the beauty of technology today and STEM in general is it provides not just a great career, but travel opportunities as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Yeah.
And so you talked really nicely about the managing the data team, but the use of AI and how that has become really prevalent. And we were mentioning or talking just before the podcast about how, you know, for many of our listeners, you'd have to be living under a rock to have not heard in the last recent months about, you know, the acceleration of AI being such a hot topic. And I know you were speaking about you've been to several conferences and been speaking to quite some thought leaders, industry leaders about this. And so I guess a key question I'd love to ask is, what do you see with AI, you know, from again, the future of it, how it's interacting? How does it evolve in your daily job?
Yeah. So this is like many businesses, you know, this is something that we are spending a lot of time and effort looking at. It could certainly be transformative. You know, with these kind of tech stories, sometimes there's a big sort of hype cycle, isn't there? There's a lot of hype, and then it kind of fades away. That's not true in this case. If you listen to any of the thought leaders, as I've done, read the white papers, it's not going to be true in this instance. It's a sort of, if you were to compare it with mobile phone tech, it's a kind of iPhone moment where it will kind of change things pretty dramatically. So yeah, we're looking at that as a you know, particularly, you know, in the world of generative AI, where it's about kind of creating content. You know, that's the business we're in as well. So this is massively interesting for us. And it's both a kind of opportunity and a threat, we think, you know, double-edged sword. And so there's a lot of work looking at that at the moment. So opportunity-wise, the main thing that these generative AI services offer is productivity gains at the moment. It's not like you can just use them to create all your content suddenly, but they can certainly give you a head start. And so that's what we're looking at the moment, is where across our business could it be helpful in saving us time and helping people to, you know, perhaps you do less of the sort of lower order tasks and focus more on the higher order tasks. So could be in marketing, where we use generative AI to draft marketing emails that go out to customers, saving a bit of time. Obviously, those will then be checked and revised by a human, but yeah, it'll save time. Or in the newsrooms, for example, that process of getting some raw copy that's written by a journalist through to the kind of finished article that will appear on our sites or apps, with, you know, summaries for social, with images and so on. You know, are there ways that these technologies can help speed that up so that the newsroom can focus on what they're there to do, which is digital storytelling? So that's opportunity-wise, I think, where we're looking. But you know, it's early days with these technologies, and we need to handle them with care. That's for sure. So one big live conversation that's happening in our business and in other content businesses is the fact that the only reason these AI models, these generative AI models, are so good is because they've been trained on huge arrays of text and content, or in some cases images and so on. Much of that will have been produced by the likes of us. And so just as, you know, music artists expect Spotify to pay them for contributing their music to their platform, well, so we don't think it's unreasonable for us to say, well, hang on, we need some value back for contributing to the power and value of these new models. So that's absolutely a live conversation right now at very senior levels. I think in terms of how we use it, the other thing we've got to be aware of is that, yeah, it is early days, and these models make stuff up. So if you listen to the likes of, as I've done, to one of the leaders on AI from Google, Philip Moyer, he refers to these models as confident toddlers. So they will blurt out stuff that sounds extremely plausible, and some of it will absolutely be true, and other parts of it will be completely made up. So there's a great example recently from The Guardian, where I used to work, where there was a researcher using ChatGPT to look at a particular topic, and she got some good results back from articles from The Guardian, quotes from a particular journalist. And when she tried to follow that up, the journalist said, well, this looks plausible, but I don't remember writing these articles. The Guardian, when it looked at its systems, had no record of these articles, and it turned out that ChatGPT had simply made them up. So, it just shows that when we look at how we're going to use these things, we're going to put some very significant guardrails around them.
Yeah, and that's such a valid example, because I think from having the conversations myself with many people looking at generative AI, as you say, and the advantages, what seems to be coming up is, although there may be a fear that it's going to take over the low order jobs or the low hanging jobs, there's going to be a new career being created for people with the expertise of what prompts to ask AI to get the right answers. And I think what you're saying, that can be manipulated by people asking the wrong leading questions to create an answer that they want to hear, rather than maybe having unbiased answers, because of the value of prompts. Is that thinking about, and News UK is a great example, where you've got two quite different publications, The Times and The Sun, and they may have different viewpoints on different things. Should there be a risk in your industry of people publishing stuff that's unfounded or inaccurate based on the data that AI is using?
Well, I mean, that's a risk now. So, but yeah, I think, but it's an opportunity as well. We are seen as authorities on subjects, and people come to us to kind of sift the large volume of information that's hitting them already. And so, yeah, I think again, it's both an opportunity and a threat. But your point about prompts is a good one. For this audience, I think it's going to be interesting seeing what new disciplines emerge off the back of this new technology. So there's already quite a bit of talk about prompt engineers as a new discipline, people who can train and refine these models to get the most effective outputs for particular uses. So that's a discipline that, I don't know, even 6 months ago, maybe it's certainly a year ago, we wouldn't have even heard of. So lots of potential new opportunity there.
Yeah, and again, that's a really valid point, especially for a lot of our listeners. I mean, I remember, and I don't know if the statistic is still true now, but 5 years ago, we were saying that in 10 years' time, 80% of the jobs haven't even been invented yet, when we're looking at how quickly technology was evolving. And I think, as you mentioned, this is probably going to accelerate even more now. I guess the other thing, again, for many of our listeners maybe, is what we're studying at college or school today. Is that going to be fit for purpose in 2 or 3 years when these jobs are coming and being created? So have you got any thoughts around advice for young people then, thinking about if they want to get into STEM, and specifically data or AI or engineering, what they could be doing, what they could be looking at above academia that could get them ready for jobs in the new world?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you my perspective on, we do hire people who are pretty fresh out of university, and in some cases, people who haven't even gone through university, through apprenticeship schemes, via agencies that match people like us with new talent that is coming through. And I mean, I think it's quite difficult for people at the start of their career to always demonstrate very specific technical ability, the kinds of things that ultimately we're going to want. That it's a sort of expectation that we don't necessarily always have. I think what we're more looking for is a spark. It's the attitude, actually. And is this person curious? Has this person done something, maybe could even be non-work related, that we can have a conversation around that will then make me think, okay, this is the right kind of person who will be able to develop the skills while they're with us that we ultimately need, and they've got the potential for that. So that's what I would advocate. And I think, just coming back to one of the points that I made right at the outset, the point about me doing languages and then ending up where I've ended up. I don't, everybody always thinks about the obvious jobs like data scientists or data engineers or software engineers, where, okay, it is quite useful to have a specific study. But there are loads of other jobs around those roles that are needed in order to be able to deliver the kinds of products that we produce. So there's product managers who work out, okay, so what problems do we need to solve? And therefore, of all the things we could do, what are the things we should be doing? What value are we looking to drive with what we're doing? There's the project managers who then, once we've worked out what it is we should be doing, who then help us to deliver that stuff on time and to budget. And there are the business analysts as well, who kind of work with the engineers to document how they're going to develop these products so that it's clear. So, and I've just done a little straw poll of the kind of new graduates that we've hired into some of those roles, and they come from an incredibly diverse background. So we've got a project manager who did sports and medical sciences at university. We've got product managers one who studied philosophy, the other used to be a physics teacher before he joined us. We've got another project manager who did chemical engineering. We've got someone in our experimentation team, actually. So that's a discipline that people may not know about, but is interesting, which is where you're working with products, deciding, okay, we're going to do an experiment to test one version of a feature versus another version of a feature and see which one works better. So the woman who manages that team is actually an ex-journalist. So I suppose the point I'm making is, STEM subjects obviously massively useful in this tech area. You don't necessarily need to have a computer science degree to get into tech.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really valid point, because there is such a misconception out there that if people didn't study maths or physics or chemistry throughout their school and into uni, that they're then limited in their opportunities of looking at STEM. But your point is so true. It's your ability, I guess, to be able to learn, and as you said, to be curious. If you're a curious mindset and you're someone who can be developed and adapted, you can fit into, there is a career for you within STEM, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so moving on to and time flies when we speak about such passionate projects or topics. What's your one or two bits of advice that you would give to our young listeners, our listeners who are trying to get a foot in the door? And I mean, I know you already covered about being curious, but is there anything else that you could offer when people are just trying to think how they can stand out or get a foot in the door, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, if you think about a big organization like ours, there's loads of great talent out there, but it's not always easy for us to work out who would be best to come into our organization. So I think, yeah, we have good success of bringing people in through those kinds of agencies who, and there's a number of them out there who take new graduates or people who've just finished their studies of some kind or another, and then give them a little bit of training, and then place them with people like us. You know, I would encourage that works for us anyway. So I'd encourage your listeners to seek them out and see what they think. I think the other bit of advice is quite often you end up with doing a group interview. This is quite specific, but what I would say is there are some people who are quite obviously shy and not comfortable in that environment. The only thing I would say is just make sure you say something. In some ways, it doesn't really matter what it is. Just say something so that you at least get noticed.
Yeah, and that's a really, really good point, I think, because it is a tough one when people have different personalities or different thinkers, but you've got to be able to give yourself an opportunity to stand out, don't you? And even if that's outside of your comfort zone. And I think interview practice can help with that, or group practice, can't they? You know, if you've not been in that environment before at college, or even with groups of friends, being able to practice the ability to contribute to conversations really does help a young person stand out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Tom, the time has flown by as always. Thank you so much for your time. And you know, from what we were talking about, and you know, from what I took down there, I loved the bit about confident toddlers. I do think AI is you know, we're going to have a period of time where there's going to be a lot of people, you know, not masking or pretending, but trying it out and what that means. And you know, as you mentioned about new disciplines, prompt engineering being one of them. So for our listeners, looking and keeping track of how it's developing on the roles that are coming up. That curious mindset you discussed, I thought, yeah, absolutely spot on. It's what will stand people out. So thank you for being on our show, and thank you for being so open about your thoughts on AI.
Well, thanks for the invitation, and nice to speak to you.
Brilliant. And to our listeners, that is another episode of our Future Tech podcast. As you know, supported by the STEM Ambassador Association. And the podcast is posted on the arrowsgroup.com/podcast website, and also on LinkedIn. So this is another show. A big thank you to Tom, and thank you to all of our listeners.